Hello there, welcome back to yet another episode of the Tango Banter. I'm Yelizaveta, and I'm here to ask some questions about life, about tango. I'm here to look at life through the lens of tango and at tango through the lens of life, in hopes of perhaps understanding myself a little better, understanding others a little better. Some of you may recall recently that I announced that I was going to be a part of the Southern California Tango Championship. I signed up to compete in the Jack and Jill category. So I will share a little bit about how that went and also some of my observations of the championship and just the culture of competitive tango, which is something that I have had many opinions about, but I have never experienced firsthand. So in this episode, I am going to talk about some of these observations and perhaps stimulate further conversation. And maybe even this will be a two-parter, because as I was writing out my notes for this episode, it just seemed like I had more and more to say on the topic. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So I want to begin by sharing with you a very memorable competition experience that served as a formative blueprint for my relationship with the idea of competition. And it sort of brings to you a very clear picture of who I have become as an adult based on that experience and what my mindset was when I was entering this competition last week. So when I was about 11 or 12, I started going to this gymnastics group that my neighbor friend was going to. And I attended maybe 2 sessions, and I decided that I was going to sign up for their end of semester competition, which was basically a choreography. And I competed, and I placed last out of 25. Now, I was mortified. I was embarrassed. I still remember the glare that was directed at me from everyone when my name was finally called out as number 25. And they did go through all 25 names. There was 25 of us. So I placed absolutely last. And from then on, I sort of turned away from the world of competition and developed extreme stage fright, which was to express itself in many, many other occasions, both within my career as an artist and my experience as a yoga instructor. It sort of plagued me. And at the time that I had started tango, I had extreme social anxiety and felt super self-conscious about my body. I was very concerned with the way I looked. And for a long time, tango was sort of scary on this very basic level. Like, I felt very self-conscious about people even seeing me dance. So I remember when I primarily danced as a follower at the beginning, I remember having this feeling of wanting to close my eyes when I danced, because in this way I was hiding. I could hide and feel alone, even though I wasn't. And it made the whole thing a little bit better. So I had a lot of anxiety about this. And at the same time, I talked about this in a previous episode. As my experience as a dancer sort of developed and I started finding these beautiful flow states within the dance. I felt that I couldn't access that flow state when on stage. It felt like it was a completely different experience altogether. So when it came to the idea of competing, performing, I just sort of completely disconnected. And also, to add to that, when I ended up pursuing a career as an artist for quite some time, when I was back in Texas, and being a young artist trying to break through, you have to deal with so much rejection all the time, constantly applying for things and constantly being rejected. So I sort of learned that when it comes to competition and trying to win at something like that, something so subjective, that rejection and inability to fulfill expectations was just sort of built into the process. I sort of did not intend my experience at the championship to be about winning. My question to myself was, would I still be able to access that flow state that I can access when I just dance? I wanted to see if I could do that in the context of a competition. Because in the past, any time that I got up on stage in front of people or tried to perform, it was always this experience of like leaving my body and shaking and freaking out and just really not being at ease. So I was curious if I could do that. It was also an important marker for me as a leader because, again, when I first started playing with the idea of leading, I never intended to lead socially. It was not something I was even imagining I could ever do. And then eventually I was leading socially, and competing as a leader today in the times that we live in now, it felt kind of like a big marker for myself and my journey from those first days of learning to lead and being extremely insecure and being afraid to now sort of daring to step into this role in a more public way. And could I go out there and just be myself and not feel like I have to perform any particular role? So I really wanted to see if I could withstand some of these pressures that I think we all feel on some level when we are looking to express ourselves creatively. It's always this battle in the world of like, putting yourself out there and being authentic about who you are and not caring what other people think. Like that's sort of the zeitgeist that we want. We want to be in that place, but it's very hard. So I had this kind of internal question for myself, if I could do that. And secondly, I wanted to be an observer. I wanted to really experience firsthand what it's like to be in a competition. I had my own preconceived notions about it, my own opinions and biases and prejudices because of my background, right? I did not have a good experience with competition growing up. I've lost at many, many things. I hadn't really experienced the reward and fulfillment of winning a competition. And so I just wanted to see what the culture was all about and what things was I right about and what things I needed to redefine for myself. So those were my two main goals. And what happened at the competition was in many ways surprising, unexpected, and in many ways it was very much what I thought would happen. So the competition started on Friday, and there were 64 people signed up for the Jack and Jill. And the way it was organized was that there were 3 groups of us that would compete, and we had time slots. And so we would walk out onto the dance floor. We would be paired up initially with someone, and then the MC came out with the big dice. And she threw it to decide how many spaces the leader would have to walk to another follower. So it's really random. So not only did we get matched randomly originally, but then we got onto the floor, and then there was this number that they would say, okay, leaders, now you move this many spaces, and this is your actual partner for the first song. Then we would move that same number again, and that was for 3 songs. So we had 3 different partners. And I was really trying to keep track of the things that are happening and noticing, because I knew I was going to be talking about this. And I was formulating what were the things that were really standing out to me. I definitely had a lot of comedic moments where I felt so out of it. I felt very like that little kid who's getting in trouble because they're not following the rules, but they don't know the rules. So I had a lot of moments like that where I felt like a kid in trouble, where like I don't know what's happening and I don't know where I'm supposed to be. But then as I was kind of fumbling my way through this, what started happening is that people would sort of end up around me, and I would end up having a lot of conversation with different people who were attending the competition or some of the people who were competing. And there was this interesting dynamic of camaraderie that formed, where people sort of looked out for each other and shared in each other's stresses and confusions or excitement. And there was a lot of pageantry, I guess. I don't know if that's the word, but that's sort of like excitement in the air and dressing up and all that. So at one point I was trying to decide between these 2 tops that I had to wear. One was a lot more blingy than the other, let's just say. And I was trying to decide whether I should wear the one that was less blingy and save the climactic outfit for the next day, or whether I should go ahead and wear the climactic outfit in my first competition. And I had to talk through this with somebody who was very helpful. And in the end, I decided that I was going to go with the blingy outfit, because as much as people were convinced that I was going to make it into the semifinals, I didn't. And that was the other surprising thing too, because honestly, I'd never competed. I've never been part of the culture. So I didn't really think that it was even that big of a deal that I was competing. But many people came up to me, many women especially, who were inspired by the fact that I was competing and the fact that I was competing as a leader. And they were so kind and so encouraging. And many of them were like, I'm sure you're going to win this round. And so without intending it, I started kind of feeling like, oh, maybe I'll go to the semifinals. Wouldn't that be amazing? And I started sort of feeling a little bit more, I don't know, cocky maybe. And so I thought, I should save the shirt. But then the other part of me is like, wait, you don't even know you're going to make it. So you might as well go all out and wear the blingy thing, which was a liquid gold shirt that was gifted to me by my boyfriend, who has the most amazing sense of clothes when he shops for me. I'm very grateful for that. So this is a shirt that he gifted me for Christmas. And I joke that I always have to wait to wear it. You know, you can't wear something like that more than once every few months. You know, you got to time it strategically because it just, you know, you can't top it a lot of times. So if you haven't seen this shirt, you can actually see the recording, the performances. I'm putting the link in the show notes so you can see all three performances. So this liquid gold shirt that I put on, and it made a splash. Let me just tell you, I was very pleased with the kind of splash it made. I got a lot of compliments, and I don't know about you, but as a tango dancer, I'm always looking for the right outfit, you know? And when you get a good outfit, man, it's very rewarding. And I've noticed that women, because maybe I talk to women about this a lot, you know, we think through our styling very, very tediously and with a lot of attention, a lot of paranoia sometimes, because we know that when you get it right, when you get just the right fit, just the right cut, just the right color, and it makes that pow effect on everyone around you, it's very rewarding. So I had that experience, and I think that was one of the biggest highlights is that I actually picked a good outfit, which, you know, kind of tells you maybe where my mind is. So anyway, so right before the performance, I'm standing in the stairwell. We're all kind of standing in the stairwell waiting to enter. And this was one of the moments that I was like, I got to talk about this moment, because here I am in the stairwell, anticipation building. Everybody's a little nervous and shaking. We know that we're going to go on any minute. And my heart, of course, is starting to pound. And I made the mistake of putting gum in my mouth like maybe 30 minutes before. And I was like thinking to myself, oh, I'll just throw it out on the way because somehow I'll find a opportunity to take it out of my mouth and put it in the trash can somewhere. And just when you think it would be that there would be a trash can somewhere, I just didn't see a trash can. So I ended up walking on the stage, rather not the stage, but the floor, the dance floor, with gum in my mouth. And I wonder if I got points off for that, for having gum. But, you know, even that fear of being reprimanded for chewing gum, like I couldn't chew gum when I was in high school, right? Like I went to a very conservative school. We're not allowed to chew gum. You always get in trouble. You always try to hide that you're chewing gum. So here I am, like chewing gum. I'm already like breaking so many rules. Anyway, so I'm standing in the stairwell at this point, not realizing that I'm not going to find a trash can yet, chewing my gum, and my heart is pounding. And I'm thinking to myself, here it is. Here's that feeling. Here's that feeling of dread. Here's this moment where you usually leave your body and you want to run away. And I was very happy that in that state, something very practical happened that I've talked about on this podcast before and in other situations. And I put it to practice this time in a real experience, which was to use this thing called the physical sigh breathing technique. I learned about this technique from Andrew Huberman podcast, and it's basically you inhale twice to the top of your lungs, and then you exhale all the air out. And I did it because Andrew Huberman said that it slows down your heart rate. So my heart is pounding. I'm standing there. I'm like starting to feel that hyperventilation. And so I did this thing. I did this sigh, and I did about like maybe 4 or 5 of them in a row. And you know what? It works. It actually literally slowed down my heart rate in real time. I felt it. So by the time I was walking on the dance floor, I was actually a lot calmer than what I was feeling in the stairwell. When we're coming out, the MC was calling out the names of the dancers. And what they would do is they would call out the leader's name and then the follower's name. And when it got to me, the MC got a little confused because she thought there might have been a mistake, I think, because she saw my name in the leader spot. And I could tell there was like this moment of confusion. So she thought maybe it got switched. So she actually read, this is what I'm interpreting, by the way. She read my follower's name first, and then she read mine. It was the only time that happened. And so I clocked it because I think, that happened so much because I would say I'm competing. And then if they were checking where I was, they would always check on the follower side and see that the name is not there. And they would get kind of confused. Or when I was, lining up leaders, followers, they were confused. Why are you in the leader line? I have to explain. So it was kind of this reminder, once again, that this is something still quite rare, unexpected. People are surprised by this. So I walk out onto the dance floor and the music starts. The MC announces the song, which ended up being one of my favorite orchestras, Miguel Caló. I feel very easy dancing it. And I took the embrace and I started dancing. And that question that I had of myself, whether I can dance with everybody watching me and feeling that stage fright, the answer is yes. And it was so easy. That's the thing that was kind of surprising. Actually, I really didn't feel that different. I felt very much in tune with the song. I felt very in tune with my partner, and I danced the way I usually dance, which is the comment I heard other people tell me when they saw me afterwards is, they just saw me dance the way I typically dance at the Milonga, which I felt was a great accomplishment, because this is something that I was very much concerned with for a long time. And it took me many years to be able to find that balance in myself. And partially, I also think that my recent exposure, let's say, through different media, through having a podcast and being more active on social media and putting myself out there, sort of keeps me practicing that same skill. And maybe that's helped. But regardless of how I got there, it felt like, wow, I've been sort of wondering if I can do this thing, but it's actually not even that much of a challenge. It's just, it's this thing that actually feels very familiar. So that was fun. It was fun to realize. And so after the competition, we had to wait a little bit of time, and then they were calling out the people who were going to make it to the next round. And there was this whole grouping of men that was coming out, like one guy after another. And I have to tell you, my heart did skip a beat or two, because I was like, oh man, the more I saw these dark suits coming on stage, I thought, wow, if I win, if I proceed to the next level, that would be kind of amazing to see me with this liquid gold shirt in a sea of men. And there was something poetic about that. But alas, that was not to be. I did not proceed to the semifinals. I was off by one person. I don't know how many tenths of a percent or whatever I missed. I should look at my scores, I guess. I haven't really studied them very much. But I was number 16, and they took top 15. I was disappointed, just because I had some sort of anticipation built up just through interacting with a lot of people who were so certain that I was going to make it to the next round. But again, what was surprising and uplifting and very rewarding is to actually have so many people come up to me and express their disappointment and express their inspiration even for seeing me compete and dancing and complimenting me. So it was kind of like worth it just for that, because again, a lot of times I feel like as tango dancers, we sort of exist in our own mind, like whatever we think about ourselves is sort of like inside our own bubble. We don't realize that there are people rooting for us and people who love us in the community. And it's always sort of surprising to me to feel that. And I really appreciate that, right? I mean, that's what community is all about. And I'm very grateful that I get to experience that in the community that I'm part of. So that part was bittersweet as well. But it also, I mean, I was kind of sad for a few minutes. And then I was like, oh, but now I can relax. I can just dance. I don't have to worry about anything else. And I was sort of ready for it. And so the rest of the event, I spent just observing and taking it all in and talking to other people. And it was interesting to both be aware of my own beliefs and judgments about this whole process, and at the same time see a lot of my friends go through this and have a different perspective, a different expression of their feelings. And something that I came away with, an awareness I came away with, was that it's very polarized, this whole world of tango. And the polarization lies at the heart of this competition versus social tango conversation. What is real tango, and does tango stop being tango when it's part of a competition? And how do you actually judge tango? What does it actually mean to judge tango? And what are the judges actually looking at? And what are they measuring? What are they judging? There are people who really are against tango existing in any format other than social, and they believe that it loses an essential part of its nature once it becomes part of competition. And I have to be honest, that's where my perspective has been myself. That's what I ascribe to. However, as I talked to people who were participating in the competition and who were enthusiastic about competitions, they were so excited to be part of it, I couldn't help but be curious as to what is it that they're actually experiencing. How is it fulfilling for them? What is it exactly that makes it worthwhile? What reward are they getting? What is the fulfillment? Because everybody that I talked to was very sincere in their the profoundness of their feelings about it and what they experience as they perform. For many of them, the work that was required for this competition, the commitment level, the discipline, the intense work that they did with their teachers, that brought about a deep appreciation and a deepening of their relationship to tango that looks and feels very authentic and very real. For other people who did not go to the competition, did not participate, and I know this is many social dancers, they see competition, tango competitions, as kind of soulless, as if it's just the form that remains, that misses the heart of it, it misses the point. And I can really see both sides being very aware of the other and being very defensive against the other. Social dancers might perceive competitors and performers as being overly concerned with themselves and with the way they look, and being sort of narcissists in some way, or having some sort of ego-driven desire for spotlight. They see competitors as being maladjusted even in the community because they don't dance a lot with social dancers. They dance with each other. They dance with other competitors. They seek out higher level dancers. They're really interested in more and more technique. And it sort of crosses over almost into that Dancing with the Stars, bombastic sort of realm of tango that's very performative and stagey, and social dancers don't like that most of the time. Now, for performers and competitors, people who are interested in perfecting their technique, they look at the social dancers and they'll say, social dancers are not committed to their tango. They don't pay respect to tango by working on it. They don't go to classes. They're not interested in improving their technique, and they're not willing to work hard, and they're not willing to go through the discipline. And that's sort of a sign of lack of character and lack of knowledge and ignorance, and sort of, you know, they're kind of the simpletons. They're not so refined as trained world-class dancers who perform and compete, right? They lack that edge. And when you put those two together in the same room, there's definitely a lot of friction. It doesn't mix very well. So I, as a social dancer, my participation in the competition and then dancing at the milongas was sort of not as fun as I typically have, because I felt like the event was very much about the performance of tango, about the beauty of the lines and the outer form. So what I experienced as a leader on the social dance floor was that we weren't dancing together. Dancers and couples, we weren't dancing together as part of a whole. It was more about showing off, and every couple wanting to take as much space as possible to show their dance and to claim their space. So for other dancers, it felt very inspiring to be in that kind of energy. For me, it felt sort of restrictive. I couldn't just relax and be there with my partner. I had to like watch out for people bumping into me, which was happening a lot. It was probably some of the worst floor craft I've experienced as a social dancer in a long time. You know, and it's surprising, right? You have incredibly talented, very virtuosic dancers on the dance floor, but the floor craft is a different skill altogether, and perhaps doesn't necessarily just come from learning tango. It's not about just learning tango. It's about dancing with other people. So, but, you know, it kind of one goes with the other, right? If you're in that space of you're mastering the art form, you want to shine, you want to stand out, you want to show off, you're going to take up the space. That's going to be your agenda. You want that. You want that attention. So it makes sense that that would be part of the overall consciousness of that kind of dance. So the more I think about this polarity and the more I talk about it with other dancers, and I've had many, many conversations at the championship and after, and the conversation continues, by the way, if you want to participate and pitch in your thoughts and your experience, you're more than welcome to join my private Facebook group. The link is in the show notes. Would love to have you there. This polarity that I'm pointing to actually exists in everything. Every form of experience that I've had, whether it's in yoga or art, any activity is going to have this polarity where you'll have people who will come at it from the perspective that this is a very personal thing. This is something that's sacred for yourself. Like in yoga, for example, there are yoga competitions, and for a lot of yoga practitioners, yoga competitions don't make sense. There are even meditation competitions. And again, people are like, this does not make sense. Why would you have a meditation competition? It sort of exists in everything. And the fact that it exists is not the problem. Polarity, I think, is just the nature of life itself. It is a reality that we're not going to agree on certain things because things evolve in different ways in different places around the world. So there's disagreement on the nature of all things, right? So it's not necessarily the problem that the polarity exists. The mistake, I think, that happens is when we so passionately believe and defend our point of view as the real, true point of view. And as I said, both sides, at least in this context of tango, both sides of the coin look very legit. All you have to do is really step into that world and talk to people, and you realize there's a lot of substance there. It's not the substance that I perhaps want that serves me, but it obviously serves a very important role for others, because otherwise, why would they be doing it, right? So I think this mistake that we make when we look at the other and we say, well, that's not the real tango. The real tango is this. That's when we've put ourselves into a box. And that creates a lot of problems, especially when you think about what that entails, that active rejection of something. And you're saying, this thing that exists in the world should be different, should not be like this. It does not deserve to exist. It is bad for it to exist. And that mindset will just make it more and more unpleasant for you to be around it. So the resistance of it will make your sensitivity to it more acute, and then it will rub you the wrong way more acutely. Now, of course, I'm not saying that you have to embrace everything and everything's okay, because that's not true either. It is just as true that certain dancers have certain values that stand in opposition to other dancers and their values. I think the key is that we can accept that both exist, that the polarity is there, and that tango, like yoga, like art, is actually a much, much bigger concept and much bigger entity, much bigger form of consciousness than we can imagine. And it can express itself in many, many, many ways. Tango has 1,000 faces, like art has 1,000 faces, like yoga has 1,000 faces. I think of tango the way I think of yoga and art. It is a neutral substance, a neutral material that we then take on and do something with. So if somebody feels this energy of inspiration that they call tango. And for them, it means to go out on stage or to compete in a competition, then that's their experience of tango. That's their face of tango that they want to explore. And if for another person, tango is really this very intimate thing that is not about surface, and it's much more about this very private communion with another person that they don't want to broadcast to everyone, and they don't really think that it needs to go beyond this connection and can stay very quiet, well, then that's their expression of tango. Like, neither one of them ultimately is the true one. Both of them are expressions of a more fundamental force in the universe. And we can accept that both of them and many, many more will come from this one impulse. You know, yoga, I learned recently by reading a really fantastic book on the history of yoga. Yoga is a much more recent development than we think when we're talking about asanas or poses, what we know as poses of yoga. Those poses that we ascribe to yoga, they're not thousands of years old. They were developed at the beginning of 20th century, and they come from the bodybuilding traditions of the time. They come from gymnastics. It was a system developed for creating health and well-being in the body on a very practical way. It was even tied to some of the military activities in India at the time. So my whole conception of yoga has been redefined, because there's no such thing as an original yoga. Yoga is being redefined every day that it is practiced, and new conceptions of it and new ways of practicing it are happening every day and will be happening every day for the rest of time. Same with tango. Tango is not static. It's going to continue evolving. There will be different ways of bringing it to life. Different people will experience it differently. And I think if we collectively can accept that, can accept tango as a reflection of who we are individually rather than this thing outside of ourselves that we either measure up to or not, whether we practice it correctly or not, I think that will be very liberating to us, because we won't have so much to live up to or so much to fight against. And we can then have curiosity and learn more about what other types of tango there are. So for me, this was the big takeaway from this championship. I kind of saw that, yeah, the reality is I'm a very social dancer. I don't have an interest in competition, at least now, at this phase of my development. But that's not to say that I don't respect and appreciate the people who are doing it. And I'm curious about what is it that they are experiencing and what is it like? And especially the question of what does it mean to judge tango? I think this was the first question that is on everybody's mind, is what is exactly that's being judged. So one thing that I am planning to do is actually to reach out to the judges of this competition and see if they'd be willing to share their perspective, their process, and how they approach the task of judging tango. So I will keep you posted on how that goes, and hopefully they'll be willing to share some of their insights. So this is really what I feel this podcast is growing into and is about. And that is this idea of tango of 1,000 faces, that every person who ends up falling into tango, every person has their own very personal journey with tango. And these journeys are very specific, and tango serves very different roles in people's lives, and it's capable of adapting to different situations. That is tango's power, that it can be danced whether it's in Argentina or India or Thailand or China or United States. It is a universal language that can be adapted. So that's my intention with this podcast, is to explore the various faces that tango puts on, and hopefully through that process we can understand a little bit more about ourselves and each other. So I'm going to leave you with that to ponder until our next banter. Thanks so much for joining. Please help spread the word about this podcast by sharing it with others. I'm happy to say that I'm getting more and more messages from people who stumble upon my podcast and are enjoying what I'm sharing. And I want this to continue. I want to grow this podcast to become a top-rated podcast out there. I think that's doable. So you are helping me in real time by being a listener and by helping me spread the word. All right, everybody. I will check in with you next time. Don't forget to join my Facebook group, and we'll banter on next week. Until then,